jolly good fellow of Google. Happiness is trainable. So my friends, these are the secrets to happiness.
이 안에 너 있다. 가장 즐거울 때는 연인과 있을 때고요. 기억을 못 하실 수도 있어요. 하도 오래되셔가지고. 우리 배우자가 친정에 가거나 출장 갈 때 상당한 즐거움을 줘요. 그러니까 사람들이 가장 불행함을 느낄 때가 언제냐면 억지로 뭔가를 해야만 할 때. 그런데 뭐냐? 왜 꿈의 치료 방법이냐?
감사합니다. My name is Meng and I have the coolest job title in corporate America. My job title is the Jolly Good Fellow of Google. One thing we have in Google is something called 20% time, which is that engineers are allowed 20% of our time, so basically 1 day a week, to do whatever we want. So I decided to spend my 20% time creating a curriculum for emotional intelligence. So I created a curriculum. The name of the curriculum is called Search Inside Yourself. So this curriculum for teaching emotional intelligence became very popular in Google. One of the most fascinating famous people I met is this guy. His name is Matthew Ricard. What is so special about Matthew? Matthew is known as the happiest man in the world, which leads to a question. How do you get to be the happiest man in the world? So here's Matthew's story. In 1972, Matthew got his PhD in microbiology. His PhD advisor was a Nobel laureate who only had 2 students, and he was one of them. So Matthew, at that time, was known to be one of the most promising neuroscientists of his generation in France. What does he do with it? He decided to become a monk. So he became a Tibetan monk. He went to the Himalayas and the mountains, and he meditated for 40 years. So you fast forward many years later, when the Dalai Lama became interested in brain science. They wanted to study how meditation affects the brain. Guess who is the most obvious subject in the world? Matthew, right? They put him into an fMRI chamber. It turns out that there is a way to measure happiness in the brain. And the way to do that is to measure the activity of this part of the brain, called the left prefrontal cortex, against this part of the brain, the right prefrontal cortex, and measure their relative difference. It turns out that the more left to right tilt, the happier the person reports to be. The reverse is true. If the more right to left, the person reports to be unhappy, very unhappy. Matthew, when his brain was scanned, his happiness was way off the charts. So I asked Matthew, and Matthew gave this definition for happiness. Happiness is defined as this, as a deep sense of flourishing that arises from an exceptionally healthy mind, not a mere pleasurable feeling, not a fleeting emotion, nor a mood, but an optimal state of being. The key words, flourishing, optimal state of being. And how do you achieve this? And Matthew says, the optimal state of being is achieved with a profound emotional balance, struck by a subtle understanding of how the mind functions. If you look at those 2 paragraphs, there are 2 insights, in my opinion. The first insight comes from the first paragraph, which is this idea that happiness is closely related freedom from affliction. The more you're free from affliction, the happier you'll be. When the mind is free from mental and emotional afflictions, in this case, anger, hatred, jealousy, greed, paranoia, fear, and so on. When the mind is temporarily free from all this affliction, for that moment, the mind experiences happiness. And how to achieve that? That is suggested by the second paragraph, which is that the way to achieve it, according to this, is emotional intelligence. What is emotional intelligence? EQ, emotional intelligence, is a collection of emotional skills. Why is that important? If EQ is just a collection of emotional skills, and if all skills are trainable, therefore EQ must be trainable. And if the formula to happiness is built upon EQ, then happiness must be trainable also. That's profound, right? Happiness is trainable. Why is it that you can train EQ? It is because of a feature of the brain called neuroplasticity, which is the discovery that what we think, what we do, and most importantly, what we pay attention to, changes the function and structure of the brain. So how do you do that? How do you train EQ? It turns out you can do this in 3 easy steps. And step 1 is attention training. So when I say attention, I mean something very specific. I mean the ability to create a state of mind that is calm and clear, and to do it on demand. Or, in other words, to calm the mind on demand, especially in times of crisis. And once you train that ability, what happens? Something profound happens. At least 3 things happen. The first thing is that this ability has profound implications for leadership, because it turns out that one of the key skills of leadership, or one of the key factors of leadership, is precisely that ability, the ability to remain calm and think under fire. So this skill alone, it makes you a leader already. The second effect, or the second benefit of this, is reflected by something Viktor Frankl says. Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies your freedom and power to choose your response. When you have the ability to calm the mind on demand, what that gives you is the ability to reliably access that space between stimulus and response. Therefore, it gives you choice, power, freedom. Freedom, my friends, from this one simple skill. But wait, there's the even more powerful effect, which relates to happiness. When you're very good at this skill, very good at calming the mind, and you're very good at calming the mind for a prolonged period of time, something happens, which is that happiness starts to arise spontaneously, fills out your whole mind, which is very strange, right? For me, even after I can achieve that state on demand I can bring up the joy. It didn't make sense to me. Like, why does this happen? So I asked a master about this. And the master told me it's very simple. It is because happiness is the default state of mind. Therefore, by calming the mind, all you do is returning the mind to its default state, which is happiness. There's no magic. It turns out that happiness is not something we have to pursue, because happiness is already there. All we have to do is to access it. Right? That is life-changing, because once you realize you don't have to pursue happiness, you can already be happy, then you're no longer a slave to having to pursue pleasure and happiness. It's already there. Then happiness becomes something that you can use. It's something that enables you to do great things, rather than you become a slave of this pursuit. So, but before we go to more, the question is, if this is so good, how do you do this? How do you train this? It turns out there's an embarrassingly simple way to do this, which is with a technique called mindfulness. And mindfulness is defined as this. It's defined as paying attention, but not just paying attention. Paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. Shall we do a 10-second experiment for 10 seconds? It's very easy. For 10 seconds, I'd like you to bring attention to the process of breathing. And then whenever your attention wanders away, bring it back. That's all. Sounds good? Okay, 10 seconds, beginning now. Okay, time's up. Every time you bring back a wandering attention, when you bring it back, it's like doing one bicep curl for the mind. And we do a lot of this. What happens is you're strengthening the mind so that eventually you have mastery over attention. And once you have mastery over attention, then you begin to have attentional skills. And the first attentional skill is the ability to calm the mind on demand. Which is why this is highly trainable and it has profound implications for happiness. But that's only step one. Step two of training emotional intelligence is self-knowledge. The type of self-knowledge that leads to self-mastery. When we experience emotion, we experience it existentially. What does that mean? For example, I say, I am happy. I am angry. I am sad. So the emotion is me. There's no separation. And because it's me, there's nothing I can do about it. Right? When your perception into emotion sharpens, something happens, which is that you get a subtle shift. And the subtle shift is going from existential to experiential. In other words, going from I am angry to I am experiencing anger. Sounds like a small difference, right? It's like, what does it do for me? The difference can be profound because when you have that level of perception, you realize that my thoughts are not me, I am not my thoughts. And if you're somebody who's stuck in a cycle of depression, that one realization, my thoughts are not me, I am not my thoughts, that one realization is the first break out of depression. So for some people, this one realization is profoundly life-changing. Step 3 in the emotional training, the EQ training process is creating useful mental habits, and specifically pro-social mental habits. One example of a pro-social mental habit is kindness. So what is the habit of kindness? It's very simple. The habit of kindness is looking at a human being, and the first thought is, I wish for this person to be happy. If you have that habit, what happens? Everything changes. Because habit becomes personality. Personality becomes character. Character becomes you. So by having a mental habit of kindness, you eventually become a person of kindness. And the best thing about this is that habits are highly trainable. How do you train a habit? Easy. Do it often enough, 30 times, 50 times, 100 times, it becomes a habit. And then eventually it becomes you. Right? It's fascinatingly simple. It turns out that being on the giving end of a kind thought is an intrinsically rewarding experience. It creates happiness, or at least it creates joy. Joy. So my friends, if what I just said is true, you just found a very important secret of happiness. That nothing changes. All you do is to create a single thought, and that thought increases the happiness. So my friends, these are the secrets to happiness. Calmness of mind that allows you to access non-energetic joy on demand sustainably, thereby giving you a sustainable access to joy. That's one. Number two is insight into the process of emotions and the process of self. Insights that allows you to free yourself from some levels of affliction. That's two. And three, most importantly, kindness and compassion. All highly trainable as mental habits and all highly conducive to happiness. And my friends, I hope this talk has been very helpful to you, and I hope that together we will create the conditions for world peace in our lifetimes.